Welcome back, everybody. It's finally spring. We're just past mud season enough where I could get the bike out, and I want to give you guys a first impressions ride on the new Road Glide with the Fuel Moto 124 big bore kit. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you've seen that this engine has pretty much been rebuilt from the ground up. Crankcase was all done by Dark Horse Crankworks, clutch is new, man of war motor sprocket, obviously cylinders. I kept the heads the same, and I kept the stock valve springs, throttle body, intake manifold, all of that was stock because I have a lower compression setup. So I'm just going to give you a first ride impression of what I think of the bike. There's a bunch of other things I've done to it too over the winter that I will do some reviews with you guys, but just to focus on one thing for now, this new engine from Fuel Moto 124 kit, 10 3/4 to 1 compression, and I can tell you so far I really do love it just from the small amount that I've gotten it out. I rode it a little bit just to check for anything that might be loose, check for leaks, kind of go through anything like that, but this will be a good indication kind of to you guys of what to expect if you're doing something similar to this. So let's do it. So this engine has the S&S 475 cam in it, and I'm sure you can hear that lope, but it's just such a great sounding cam. First things I noticed when I got on this was that it takes a little bit more throttle than I was used to when taking off. So before, with the stock engine, you could kind of just ease out the clutch a little bit, and if you were on level ground, there was enough torque and the way it was set up, it just took off kind of on its own with you. But right now, I'm not sure if it's the cam or if it's because I have a heavier duty clutch now, it's got more grab to it, but it seems like it takes a little bit more gas to just get me going, a little bit more throttle, which is no problem. It's just something to get used to. The clutch with the upgraded heavy duty springs is definitely heavier. So on the clutch pull, it's a lot more rugged feel to it. It's not bad. You know, if you had some kind of a wrist injury in the past or low strength kind of that you're worried about, you might want to consider putting in a piece that would lighten up that pull for you. But for the normal guy, I think it's going to be no problem. You will notice a difference, but it's pretty easy to get used to. The counterbalancer was removed in this engine, which I wasn't sure what to expect. And so far I really like it. So at idle, especially with this 475 cam, there's a lot of vibration. I mean, the mirrors are bouncing up and down on you when this is at idle, and it's really got a lot of vibration. The newer trucks are coming out this spring. Smell of Vermont. But once you get above idle, this engine is actually really smooth. With that counterbalancer removed and then the flywheels balanced by Dark Horse Crankworks, I'm really liking it. So one of the biggest things that I noticed was when you get the RPMs up there on the stock engine, it just felt like it didn't like it. It didn't want to stay up at a higher RPM. But now that the counterbalancer is removed, it seems like it wants to stay wherever you put it. And it doesn't care. It doesn't care if you're at 2,000 RPM or you're at 4,500 RPM. It is fine wherever you set it. And I really like that. It seems to be just easier to run, and I appreciate that. And it's pretty smooth. I mean, at higher RPMs, 2500 is not high is where I'm sitting at right now, but there's just a slight vibration, kind of what you'd expect just from a V2N running under you, which is fun to feel. But it's not like your hands go numb or you can't stand it. It's not bad. But the nice part with the counterbalancer removed is when you get up to these higher RPMs, so I'll push it up to 3000, it's even smoother at 3000. Super nice. And then if you can get up to 3500, it's just purring along. It's totally smooth. It's really nice. So that's a great improvement. I would recommend anybody who's getting into their case do that change, remove that counterbalancer. I'm loving it. This is a kind of a slow section through a school zone, so I have to tone it down a little bit. That thing sound good. Downshifting's nice and easy. The bike feels very familiar, so I was nervous when I was going to get on this. How was it going to feel? I was a little nervous that the power might be intimidating. It might be a little herky-jerky. How hard is this power going to be to manage? But really, if you're familiar with riding a stock Harley, especially a Milwaukee 8, you'll be just fine jumping into this. Really the first thing, like I mentioned earlier, is just getting used to that different clutch feel when taking off. But after that, it felt great. It felt predictable. I knew what was going to happen. The bike never surprised me, kind of launched me at a certain RPM range, or nothing was unmanageable. I wasn't just spinning the tire every chance I got, because it was tough to keep under control. It really is a manageable engine. As we get out onto the main road here, open it up a little bit, you guys can hear what it sounds like. I'm still in the break-in period right now, so I can't horse it too bad. As you can see, kind of on the tack and the speedo, I've got some tape there just to remind me of what RPM range and speed I shouldn't go above according to the S&S recommendations. So Fuel Moto's big bore kits are S&S cylinders, so I'm just going off of their recommendations for break-in. Predictable power, very responsive, sounds great. But you can probably hear it right now. I'm in 5th gear, doing about 50. It's not extremely loud. It's not an obnoxious motorcycle. That's something I was worried about getting into this engine with free-flowing exhaust. I was worried about just being deafening. I've got the S&S Grand National slip-ons, and those really do a great job. I think they sound great. It's definitely a bike I would still be comfortable cruising on the highway for a few hours with. I usually wear earplugs anyway just because of the wind noise, and that helps with the engine noise too on long trips, just less fatigue that way. But overall, really impressed with this engine. There's a couple things that I did in the drivetrain with this engine too that kind of affects how it feels. So the Man of War motor sprocket isn't a solid motor sprocket, but it's close to one. It's got some rubber bushings that kind of help absorb the impulses, but it's not like the compensator that comes stock on these motorcycles that has a lot of movement and a lot of give in it. I also have a more rigid it can be a little jerky depending on how smooth you are as a rider. So it definitely is. It feels tighter, more responsive, snappy, I guess would be a good word, which is kind of what you want in a performance engine. I mean, you want the power there as soon as you twist. So it's a good thing in many ways, but also you do have to pay a little bit more attention to how smooth you are with this engine versus the stock. When I first got the bike back from Wilkins Harley Davidson, who finished it up for me, I remember shifting it into first gear for the first time, and it was so smooth. Unlike any shift I had ever felt on this bike or any other Harley that I've ridden. But since that, it's that clunk has kind of come back a little bit. It's not quite as quiet and smooth as when I first got it back. So my feeling is probably things are just breaking in a little bit. You know, the fluid is starting to get a little bit more worn in. Gotta lean into it. It really wants to push you back. I would say I may have gotten just a little bit over third throttle at that point back there. It's got a lot more to give, and really with the 475 cam and the way this engine worked out tuning wise, the peak torque level is somewhere around the 3,000, 3,500 mark. Which is almost at the limit of where I can go right now with break-in. So I'm really just starting to get into where this bike is pulling hard when I've got to start letting off the throttle. So I'm really excited to see in the future how this bike's going to perform, but man, I can see it's going to be really fun. I did have one check engine light show up yesterday. I took it out for a brief ride, and it was a oxygen sensor throwing the code of running rich, and it was right after start. So within 2 minutes of being started, it threw that code. And I have a feeling that just because the bike adds a little bit of fuel when it's first started, and then it takes a little bit to kind of burn that out, that the system just saw a rich condition and then popped the code. So I just shut the bike off after it warmed up for a little bit, cleared the code, and then rode for a good amount of time, and it never came back. And it hasn't come back yet too after riding today. So no issues with that. Bound to get that on engines that are modified a little bit. Let me know if you guys have any specific questions in the comments below, maybe something I didn't cover or address, what you think of some of the parts. I'm going to try to do some videos in the future that kind of focus a little bit more on a specific component. I plan on doing a video on my Oline suspension. I was able to put in Oline suspension in the front, and I also have a new seat on this bike. I did a previous video entitled The Best Harley Seat, and it was done by Meat City Cycles, and I found that the foam was starting to break down on me. It was kind of compressing a lot when I was riding, and I was getting a lot of pressure on my tailbone. So rather than having them rework it a second time, it kind of seemed like it didn't last, do another video with you guys and kind of do a little bit of a review on that once I get some miles on it. Get off here and just kind of walk around the bike and let you guys hear it running. But what an awesome engine. Really liking it. Nice and smooth. It sure doesn't look smooth when you watch it though. At idle, it's got a really rough idle. You can even see how smooth this engine is once you add some throttle. You just see it smooth right out. It's like it's not even moving. And you can see how rough that idle is. Even the front tire's kind of bouncing a little bit, which I think is pretty cool. Some people don't like that, but kind of makes you feel mean when you're sitting at a stop sign. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the ride, and hopefully the little bit of a review on the engine. I haven't seen anybody that's done a riding review of a Fuel Moto 124 kit, so hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Kind of know what to expect if you go through the amount of work that I did to an engine. So we'll see you next time. Ride safe.